All right, welcome everyone. Huddle Up Podcast. Obviously, it looks a little bit different on my end. Dave's back with us this week. Still no Matt. Hopefully, everybody, if you're having any issues hearing any of us, throw us a comment here because it may be a technical glitch in the world. Obviously, the backdrop of me is a little bit different. We're having some work done in the studio, so and I think Sean is in a different setting as well. Maybe a little bit of wind, but we're going to go with it. It's Tuesday, September 22nd. Obviously, you want to make sure you check out our social media, Huddle Up Podcast on Facebook and on Twitter, YouTube. If you just go to any of our social media channels, you will find the link tree there, and that will get you to all of the places that you need to go. So hope everybody is having a good night. If you're following along with us, wherever you're following, give us a like, give us a share. We would appreciate that, and that will get as many people in here as possible. So let's get into it. Sean, how you doing this week?
Oh, doing great. If it wasn't for all of the Tampa wins and New Orleans losses yesterday, the radio would be a lot nicer. But we're enjoying life down here. A very non-humid day. Didn't get super hot, and because of that, I'm sitting out in the Florida room doing my first ever broadcast from outdoors here in the Sunshine City.
Very nice. Dave, how you doing this week? Welcome back.
Thanks, guys. Doing all right. Hanging in there, of course. Panthers got shellacked again, but that's going to be expected for the year. CMC's hurt for way too long to even win a game right now, but football's back. Football's happening. Whether you like it or not, football's back, and it gives us some normalcy back.
Yeah, it most certainly is. Everything is back, and that's the first thing to talk about tonight. The Big Ten, of course, announcing they had to do it the day after our show last week in fine Big Ten form. But the Big Ten back in action in late October. They make the announcement, an 8-game schedule with a conference game, championship game following that. So just thoughts, and I know there's been a lot of thoughts and opinions about the Big Ten's handling of the whole situation. Just thoughts on the Big Ten returning, and we'll get then to the question of the week. Dave.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's again, we kind of touched on it a couple of weeks ago, but it's about time the Big Ten got on board. When the big college football guys said that they were going to play, you got to kind of get on board here. You're going to get left behind, a la the Pac-12 at the moment. But again, my whole issue with the whole thing was what information changed that all of a sudden 3 days later or 6 days later that you're going to make a drastic shift after you release the schedule. So good to have them on board, but still think they did some damage there with not having as many games and things along those lines. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens long term, but happy to have more football around.
Yeah, no doubt, and that will be the discussion with the question of the week. But Sean, your thoughts, and I know we touched a little bit on it last week. Did you have any other thoughts to the Big Ten's return?
Well, yeah, I mean, good for them, I guess. Obviously, a lot of these schools wanted to play, and the Big Ten, despite what was up against them in certain states and cities, was able to get something done. Obviously, we touched on it last week. Is there a little bit of a gripe from these schools that have had to put in a little bit of work already, and are planning for you're kind of planning for your conference schedule, and I think teams were kind of settling into the fact that those conferences weren't going to be there. So you kind of have that whole mindset of like, and it's not going to change your prep that much, but certain games maybe didn't matter as much, or you had a chance to look ahead at some games because there were less kids in the pool. And now you have a couple big names in there again. I mean, obviously Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, probably your biggest three as a threat to mess up anything that was going to happen. But and then you're going to have to decide, like we said before, is 8 wins and no losses versus 10-1, 9-1. Those kind of weird ones, we talked about in the ACC, a Clemson, Notre Dame loser still having a chance to get in. Does that team get affected by that? I think you could have a lot of questions. There's usually not that much of a discrepancy in games played at the end of the year. But it makes Saturdays a little more fun. You have some conference, a conference that you're used to, And I think it's going to be good for ratings, obviously. But beyond that, I think it almost could throw more of a wrench into things, and do a little bit more bad than good at season's end. But for now, we'll just try to enjoy some football, I guess.
Yeah, and that leads to the question of the week, and that's kind of the main point of questioning, and Dave kind of touched on it. We touched on it a little bit last week. Is what does an 8-win regular season and conference championship, if you can get through that schedule and get clean through it, should you be considered? Should you be a part of the college football playoffs? Whose resume is it? I mean, if you're the Big Ten, you would have to think that if it's an Ohio State, that resume is probably going to hold up because based on where they were ranked in the preseason and all of that. But if Ohio State doesn't make it clean, is it Michigan that goes undefeated? Is it Penn State that goes undefeated? Is it Wisconsin? Is it somebody else? And if it isn't maybe one of the premier teams in the conference, then can that 8-win schedule stack up against a team that's played nine conference games and an out of conference game plus a conference title, 9 versus 11? How does that, and if you're following along here in the live video, give your thoughts. Our old pal Jason asked who the Dave Gerhardt nerd is hanging out over there. But give your thoughts, leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you as well on this. But should a Big Ten conference champion, should their resume hold up, and should they be eligible? I mean, obviously they're going to be eligible if they play, but when I say eligible, I mean in reality, should a Big Ten conference champion actually make it to the conference championship game? Dave, I'll throw it to you first here.
Yeah, so I'm going to do my normal not answer with an answer, but I really think it depends on a whole bunch of things here. I mean, it depends on who the Big Ten team beats over the course of the year. If you have a Big Ten champ that's 8-0 and they don't touch Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, etc., and their wins are against the other 8 in the conference, which I don't even know if that's possible in all honesty. But if your wins are against those type of teams, and then you have to look at what happens in the other conferences. If your conference winners are undefeated there, and you have an undefeated, again, I don't know the schedules offhand, don't have anything in front of me, but if you have an undefeated Alabama and an undefeated Georgia, and Georgia beats Alabama 24-21 in the SEC title game, you're freaking crazy if you don't think both of those don't get into the national title play, or the college football playoffs. So I think it kind of depends. It depends on who I think it depends on who the Big Ten teams beat and the fashion that they beat them in. You have, Ohio State, Michigan, and they're the top 2 teams at the end of the year, and they play each other, and Ohio State beats Michigan by 28. Ohio State's resume is a lot stronger than a 3-point win over Michigan then. So I think you really have to keep your foot on the pedal if you're a Big Ten team. But I also think largely it depends on what happens in these other conferences a lot too, that, you have the advantage that you have more games, but 2 losses, I think you're definitely trumped by a Big Ten champ that's undefeated, and probably a Big Ten champ overall. But if you have a real strong resume and you're a champion, or even losing the championship game and it's your first loss, I think you deserve every bit to be in the conversation. But I think it's going to be dependent upon a lot on the style points that I think they're going to be factored in more than previous years. And ultimately, the other piece that has to be talked about in this argument is if you're a 7-1 Big Ten team and your only loss was when you had 20 players out for COVID, how does that factor into things?
Yeah, I mean, and that's obviously the scenario, college football across the board. I mean, we already know that this weekend Notre Dame and Wake Forest postponed. There's been numerous games postponed each and every week. So, the hope is that you can get these games rescheduled. The hope is that you can, everything gets back to being on board. But obviously, you never know. And if an outbreak gets really out of control, is there a team that's going to have to get shut down and stuff like that? So that can obviously impact any plans that schools have. And plus, I guess there's still some sort of buzz that the Pac-12 is trying to get back into the mix. So This entire season is a ever evolving situation.
Pac-12's too late. They don't count at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I just remember
they're in the Pacific time zone, so it's like 2 weeks ago there. So they got time.
I'm just happy that COVID happened, so Notre Dame's finally not in a conference, and they actually stepped up finally.
Right. What were the odds of that? Notre Dame finally.
They joined a conference and everybody got sick.
Yeah. See,
it's all about affecting cause, right?
It's screwing up the balance of the universe. Notre Dame joining a conference. But Sean, your thoughts? Should a Big Ten champion be eligible for the college football playoff?
Well, right out of the chute, I'd say I agree with Dave, which is a rarity, but it's a as far as where the dominoes fall is a pretty important piece. If you're looking at teams that have a loss or two in the ACC, SEC, who are they to? What situation did it happen in? Was one of them in a conference title game? And then with the Big Ten, who is undefeated? Like you said, if you got a team that kind of goes through a undefeated season and only plays 1 or 0 of those power couple teams, they're going to have to put some style points. I think, I think there's scenarios where an undefeated Big Ten team doesn't get in. I think it's going to be kind of a miss, kind of a weird situation for that to happen. But I think, you just got to kind of play that into the situation. Now, for those big teams, I don't know, with less games in a conference, I almost, as far as a selection committee or a selection system, it would almost be nice to see them. I don't want to say go back to the AP, coaches poll kind of scenario, but maybe take the computer out of it more. Kind of look at it from a realistic perspective, almost like a replay official might on a play, and just, really look at the scenario and be like, points or not, like you don't have as good of a resume where a computer's not necessarily going to say that. I don't think that'll happen, but the odds of a situation coming into play where it's really a battle like that, fairly slim. The one positive, and I thought about it when I was looking over the poll question, and it just kind of sprung up on me when we were talking about COVID. One pro of the Big Ten playing less games, and if the Pac-12 comes in and starts playing less games, it may build in for the other conferences an opportunity to not have to reschedule COVID-affected games, depending who it is. Now, obviously, in a situation of like Notre Dame, Wake Forest, it's probably more detrimental to Wake Forest if they thought they could run a table to kind of lose out on an opportunity at a big win if you really thought you were going to stand. But as far as a Notre Dame perspective, like if you lose a game against Wake Forest and it never gets rescheduled, is it really going to hurt your resume? Probably not. Not any more than a Big Ten opponent playing against their opponents. So, it might build a little flexibility there. And if the Big Ten or Big Pac-12 would have to extend any seasons or anything, I don't think you have to change anything. If you tack some games on, maybe the reward for these teams that played earlier is just a chance at some rest. So, that was just my take on the COVID of it. But I think as a whole, it's going to be some rare situations. But to me, like Dave said, it's going to take 2 losses from one of those other conferences, most likely, for me to see them knocked out by an undefeated Big Ten school.
Yeah, I don't know if it necessarily take 2 losses. It just depends on how a schedule shakes out.
Or I guess who the loss is and who
sure.
the schedule
because,
right.
I mean, it's, not to insult your home state here, Sean, but Notre Dame beat up a defenseless.
Oh, please do. Yeah, please do.
Notre Dame beat up a pretty defenseless South Florida team. Clemson, as their out of conference game, beat up on the Citadel. So, what's
the difference?
The extra game outside of the conference, that 10th game, really isn't a huge victory by any stretch of the imagination. So,
well, tell that to all the Big 12 teams that lost to who was it? The Arkansas States and such the first weekend.
Well, but I mean, those Big 12 teams aren't going to be in the college football playoff discussion anyway. So that's
and I think the only way it comes into discussion there is if you have a team like say Clemson comes out, they really play this game. I mean, obviously there's bumps and bruises and scrapes that nobody hears about. Somebody has gets a knee bruise or something. Nobody really hears about it. Next week, that same knee, tears. Would that have happened in the same set of games? Obviously wear and tear happens. And I think that's where the argument is. It's not so much I played a quality opponent or I didn't play. I still risked losing to an opponent that would have cost me a playoff. If South Florida had showed up and, forced a couple turnovers early, upset Notre Dame, I don't know that Notre Dame has a shot unless they beat Clemson twice. That kind of loss is just detrimental, especially in a short season. So, you're taking an extra risk going out there. Ask any of those big teams, like Dave said, that in years past have lost to lesser teams. It's a risk that the Big Ten isn't taking,
Sure.
and they may end up being rewarded for it. But that's just kind of my spin on that extra game. I don't think it matters in the grand scheme now.
No, and I guess my point to it was, let's take the ACC for example. But by all accounts, all the preseason predictions are Clemson 1, Notre Dame 2. They meet in South Bend in November. If that's a close game, but Clemson wins, so they stay at number 1. But then you get to the ACC championship, and let's say Notre Dame, puts it together, and they get a 10-point win, a 14-point win. Then you start to ask the question, okay, Notre Dame's resume, they had a 3-point loss to Clemson in November, but a 10-point win here, so we probably put them in. So now you look at a 1-loss Clemson, who lost to 10 to Notre Dame, but then you have, on this hand, a undefeated Ohio State. Theoretically, that's where, could an undefeated 9-win Ohio State Big Ten champion get in over a, what would that be, 10-1 Clemson team who just lost by 10 in the title game. So I don't necessarily say it has to be a 2-loss situation, but obviously, it's
right.
It just depends on how the situation plays out. Obviously, a Big Ten champion should theoretically be eligible, but a matter of how eligible or how likely, that's where the real question comes.
So Jim, just hypothetically playing off of that, Notre Dame finishes with 1 loss. They win the game in South Bend in a close fashion. They lose the championship game, and Ohio State is undefeated and gets in over Notre Dame. Fair or not? Notre Dame's only losses in the championship game.
How bad
Clemson.
did they lose the championship game?
Yeah.
Close-ish. Touchdown.
If it's by
and they beat them in Notre Dame. Like, what do you do it like? And you and I both love the madness at the end of the year, so it's
Sure.
another one of those. What do you do? But your only loss is to Clemson, but you've already beaten Clemson. So what do you do? And that's where it's going to be fun. And you got to hope that the Big 12 eliminates themselves.
Well, yeah, and are all of Ohio State's victories, convincing, or did they squeak out a couple? Did they only win by a field goal versus Minnesota or something like that? If they won in convincing fashion, then maybe Ohio State gets in over Notre Dame. But if they eked out a win, in mid-November against, Minnesota or Iowa or whoever, then maybe you look at Notre Dame's resume and their margin of victory. I could certainly see a scenario, and it would obviously frustrate me to no end, but I could see a scenario where Notre Dame is on the outside looking in.
I think that scenario is very slim. I don't, because the odds are, if Notre Dame's losing a close title game in the ACC, let's assume it's to Clemson, because that seems to be what we've laid out.
Sure.
Ohio State, whatever they're doing in there, because do they have a title game, the Big Ten?
Yeah, they'll have a title game.
They'll have their usual, right? So Ohio State's going to be winning in that title game against, let's assume it's Nebraska again, most likely. I don't know who else. Wisconsin, I probably, but again, like you said, it's going to come down to those wins, not just by quantity, but how's Penn State's season going? How quality of a win is that? How's Michigan's season going? Well, how quality of a win is that? If those two teams have exchanged losses and have 3 losses apiece, I don't think you have any quality wins. Not even in the title game, unless Wisconsin somehow comes out of that with 1 loss or something like that. But yeah, I see very few scenarios where if that's the scenario Notre Dame has, is they lose in a title game, they're going to have the same record as Clemson. So even if one of them's out, who's to say it's not Clemson? depending how the track record is. If Notre Dame's done everything they can up to that point and looks more impressive coming in, especially if they're favored, and they lose that conference game and they've exchanged losses, I don't know that Clemson jumps Notre Dame in that scenario. It depends what their resume looks like. So there's a lot of ways that Notre Dame still makes that jump, but that's the way college football is. Maybe they should have expanded the playoffs a little bit, like every other sport, made it more interesting. But we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll get to that a little bit closer. I think there's a chance these teams drop some games mid-season.
Yeah, and I mean, as I've said the whole time, that if there's going to be a sport that doesn't make it to that finish line, I still think it's college football.
Me too.
Because
hands
we're
down. College sports in general, like just
it's
a situation where
it's the most volatile. I mean, we've seen the NFL has been pretty successful here for the first 2 weeks. Obviously, the NBA, NHL, they've bubbled. The Major League Baseball is going to bubble for their playoffs. So there's no reason to believe that they
just
shouldn't.
an add-in. Let's point out that all of these scenarios we've done are assuming that one of the big three from the Big Ten comes out undefeated. Are we all in agreement that if one of them drops a game or all of them drop a game, where no one from the Big Ten is undefeated, that odds are they are not represented in the
Big Ten champion has to go undefeated.
It would have to take a lot of miracles for a one-loss Big Ten team at this point to get in. Like you're playing, go for all or nothing.
I think it depends on when that loss is and how that loss happens. If you have Ohio State that wins, they're playing 8 games, so they go 7-1. Their only loss is when they have 20 players out with COVID by 10 points, but their 7 wins are 21 plus. It's going to be an interesting argument. I mean, it goes back to what's the intent of college football playoffs, which we don't know how it's defined every damn year. It's different.
Right. But again, that computer right now is still in play. Like there's they haven't changed the way the selection happens. And I know that humans are involved a lot, but
the computer's going to break. It's 2020.
But how into the selection process do they factor in that COVID is my thing. If Notre Dame comes out of this and they don't going into next week, don't have a complete clean team, but are able to play, and they drop a game, are the true, because the rankings coming into that selection process are going to be still based on how much did you win by, who did you play. It's not going to so much be like who was sick. I don't think they're going to factor that in 100%, at least as far as rankings are concerned. So unless you're still in that top 4 to 6, I'm not sure that helps you at selection time. I think you're just going to have to fight through the virus. And if that many players are sick, that's the scenario where you just don't play.
I agree. Yeah. I think it's going to be very interesting to say the least, but it's going to be one of those interesting arguments that are going to be added to this whole shit talk that happens when they're doing the selection thing. And I mean, what happens if you have 20 players that are, Notre Dame next week and they aren't fully recovered, but can you really afford to drop 2 games and not play them? I don't know the answer to that. I think we're, unprecedented territory on this.
But Dave, my argument was if you have undefeated 1 loss in the ACC, undefeated 1 loss in the SEC, that kind of scenario, maybe even Big 12, somebody's going to go undefeated. Let's call them Oklahoma. My argument was if it's Ohio State, if it's Michigan, whether that loss is to the second best team in the Big Ten or not, at 7-1, do you really think that if there's no teams with 2 losses like up then, there's all 1-0, do you really think that Ohio State's going to have enough pull, no matter what the scenario is on that loss? I mean, I know everybody loves Ohio State at the selection committee time because
I feel like they shouldn't, but I feel like somehow they're going to. I feel like you're getting 3 conferences into the college football playoff. So if you're 0 loss and 1 loss in 2 of the conferences, and then the other 2 big conferences have 1 loss and 2 losses, you're getting someone from those other 2 conferences. In my opinion, whether it's earned or not, I think you're getting a third conference in somehow. I really don't have a good answer to that other than.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
There's absolutely a chance. I mean, it's 2020, so anything can happen.
Anything can happen.
Yeah,
Minnesota can run the table.
All right, let's move on here. There are a few big matchups that are, at least as of here on Tuesday night, are still on the docket for this weekend. Obviously, with the Notre Dame news today, that can change at any moment. But let's start off noon on Saturday. It is number 21 Louisville. They are 1-1 at number Excuse me. Is Louisville? I wrote that they're both 21. That can't be a possible thing. Well, Pitt's ranked. I think they were. I think
It's
they might
2020.
be.
Everybody's 21.
Yeah, everybody's 21. I think Pitt might be 20th. But they are 2-0. They're a 2.5-point home favorite. Over under 54.5. This one at noon on the ACC network. I like Pitt to keep rolling here. I think this should be a pretty decent ACC battle.
Yeah, I'm showing Louisville at 24, Pitt at 21.
Okay, so it's Louisville at 21, or Louisville at 24, Pitt at 21. I still like Pitt here. I think that they will cover the 2.5. Might not be by a lot, but I like them, and I'm actually going to go the under. I haven't seen Pitt play yet this year. Louisville didn't necessarily impress me last week in the Miami game, so I'll go Pitt plus the points, but I'll take the under. Dave, we'll go to you.
I'll take Louisville. I thought they looked okay last weekend against Miami. They just were dumb in the third quarter. When you allow, I think it was 210 yards on 4 offensive plays for Miami. You got some pretty explosive play defense gappage there. But other than that third quarter, I thought they looked okay, considering that they were outmanned largely for that. But Pitt's a different type of opponent, so I think you got Louisville this week, and I agree with you on the under on this one.
Sean, how about you?
Well, I think it's going to be an interesting game. I'd first like to point out that in our predictions of the Miami-Louisville game, I called the game pretty much exactly how it happened. Just want to throw that out there. 2 good offenses, Miami with the only defense in the contest, and they stopped them enough times to pull that one out pretty easily. I think Miami is a real good still team, but we'll talk about them another time. As far as Louisville putting up a ton of points. Pitt looking to go 3-0 for the first time since 2014. Pretty big one, and why not? It's 2020, but Pitt can't score. They played Syracuse last week, only put up 21 points, threw a couple of turnovers, but their defense held Syracuse to only 10. Looks like another good defense rolling into Louisville's way. I, too, am also going to take Pitt to go 3-0 because it's 2020. Why not put Pitt at 3-0? And I think it's going to be close, because I think Pitt's defense is going to stop Louisville, but I think Pitt's offense is going to stop Pitt's offense. And I think it's going to be kind of a weird scenario. But at 55, is that what you're going with? I'm showing 55. Was yours 55?
Yeah, 54.5. So it's right.
Well, that changes everything. I don't like it anymore. Why not? I'll take the over. I feel like maybe Pitt gets a special team score, too. That would be what I would need for my brain to put it over. I'll take the over thanks to some special teams plays.
All right, very good. Again, if you're following along with us, leave a comment, leave who you think might win these games. If you have any other questions for us, throw them up there. We'll get to them as well. Then we go to SEC. The SEC finally back in action, starting this weekend.
Everybody here is excited.
I bet. Number 23, Kentucky at number 8, Auburn, who is a 7.5-point home favorite. The over/under on this one, 47. This one at noon on the SEC network. I'm gonna go Auburn here. I'm gonna take Kentucky to cover the 7.5. This is just kind of throwing shit at the wall because obviously we have nothing to base this on. And I'm actually gonna take the under on the point. I think sometimes when you have a matchup of 2 top 25 teams coming out of the gate like this, I think teams might be a little bit timid to get things going out of the gate. So I'm going to take Louisville to cover the points and the under. Dave, how about you?
We're gonna take the over since you took the under. Easiest way to handicap football, go the opposite way that Jim does.
He's not wrong.
And instead of taking the points with Kentucky, we're going to say screw it, and they're going to win this game straight up. So Kentucky's going to beat Auburn.
Very good. Jason picked Pitt because Dave picked Louisville. So that Louisville. Yeah, I think I said Louisville. I think I said Louisville earlier.
Bull, Louisville. Yeah.
Sean, how about you? Kentucky and Auburn.
Well, I was worried for a second. I was going to have to agree with Dave because I thought he was going my way. Good news is he was way wrong. I, too, am going to take the over, and here's why. Auburn is a program that historically has destroyed offenses with their defense in the SEC, but was unable to score. They would lose games 6-3, 9-3. Bo Nix probably one of my 2 or 3 favorite names in football right now. Bo Nix, quarterback for Auburn. Last year, he hit the 50-point mark as an offense. Auburn scored 50 points 4 times. Only time that's happened was when Auburn had a Heisman Trophy winner named Cam Newton. So I'm going to say, and that might be my stat of the day. I don't have much better than that. But I think that Auburn scores a ton of points. I'm going to take Auburn. I'm going to take them to cover, and I'm going to take the over. I think there's going to be a lot of points, and most of them are going to be on Auburn's side. I don't think Kentucky has the firepower to keep up with Bo Nix. And I think once Auburn remembers what SEC football feels like, they're just going to rumble through this game, and hopefully with some momentum can disrupt some things in the SEC.
All right, and then the final college matchup featuring 2 top 25 teams this week. A 2-0 Army. They are 22nd in the country, traveling to number 14 Cincinnati, who is 1-0. They are a 14-point home favorite. The over/under on this one's 46.5. 3:30 Eastern time on ESPN. If this one was at Army, I'd probably be a little bit more comfortable picking the Black Knights. But I'm going to go Cincinnati to cover. I'm going to go the over. I think that team, we talked about in the preview a couple weeks ago that they're probably one of the class teams in the AAC. So they want to make sure that they hammer the things they need to. So I like Cincinnati here a lot. Dave, how about you?
I'm going with Army and the under against you again. So we're going to see a lot of that run D and that run against the Bearcats there. They're going to control the clock and milk the clock and do the typical Naval Academy, catching 2+ touchdowns. You take them, play the under. They're going to control the clock, control the game, control the tempo, and make Dave a winner.
All right. Sean, how about you?
First of all, I think it's great that you have 2 competitive military academies. I think having Navy and Army in the mix for the top 25, I mean, obviously never challenging for a national title, but always making it to a bowl, sometimes close to New Year's Day. I think that's awesome for college football. Having said that, I do agree with Dave to an extent. I do agree that Army is going to come out running, and they're going to try to control the clock. And because of that, the under is going to happen. So you're right there. What you're wrong about is that Army's not going to be able to completely stop Cincinnati. Cincinnati can score fast, but I think they can also control a clock. I know Jim and I both had Cincinnati and Memphis. I think I had Memphis, but there was a couple of those schools that we thought might come out of there with a chance even at the Big Four. Now, obviously, the Big Ten affects that, but I think Cincinnati's got a real good offense. I think they're going to cover this spread fairly easily by game's end, but they're just going to run out of time with what was burned in the first half while Army had the ball, and it's going to go under.
All right, then. Let's move to the NFL. Obviously, the big story out of this weekend was the injury bug has bit the NFL real hard. And for years, people have talked about no preseason. We don't want preseason. It's not any good anyway. Well, this is what you're going to get when you don't get a preseason. I understand the off-season programs and things were not the same this year because of the pandemic. But if you don't have those games to get guys to play a couple of quarters and get ready, you're going to run into problems. A couple of the notable injuries that I picked out, Nick Bosa and Solomon Thomas from the 49ers, both out for the year with ACLs. Raheem Mostert, Tevin Coleman, they could both miss multiple weeks for the 49ers with knee injuries. Obviously, Saquon Barkley out for the year, ACL. Christian McCaffrey, at least a month, I think they said they're looking at with an ankle injury. Drew Lock for the Broncos, he's out at least 2 weeks. They signed Blake Bortles today for the backup job in Denver.
Poor backup that's not good enough to be like, we need Blake Bortles.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
And then Cortland Sutton, their number 1 receiver.
Jeff Driscoll, baby.
Yeah,
Driscoll season.
Unreal.
But obviously there was even more injuries. These are just a couple of the notable ones. From both and you saw some big ones in week 1. I mean, Dallas lost their starting tight end, and there's some other big ones as well. But I mean, this is what we were all kind of wondering what the NFL season is going to look like. Are guys going to get sick? Who's going to miss time from COVID? We weren't actually even really thinking about the fact that these major injuries were going to happen in pretty rapid succession. And I think now I'm not necessarily saying you have to continue to have 4 preseason games, but I think this proves that you need a preseason in the NFL, because if you don't have one, this is what you're going to get in those first couple of weeks. Guys are going to go full bore right out of the gate, and there's going to be problems. Dave.
Yeah, I agree with all that. That you definitely injury prone and all that. But the other thing to remember, kind of on this all too, is they did cut camp short to some extent too, and not even cut short, but altered some of it too. So yes, there's a lot of this to do with the lack of preseason, but is it that camp and all that too? And I can't even imagine being on a medical staff of any sense with the football team right now, just with all the protocols and everything that you have to do. So pretty interesting. But I think overall 2 weeks here, you have a lot of what's kind of expected, for lack of better terms. That the Ravens are really good, the Chiefs look pretty good the first game. The Eagles look like shit, which is expected. So
stop it.
The Panthers look like ass, which we knew that was coming. I think one of the shocks has been how in control of the Patriots offense Cam looks, which is kind of interesting, and it's amazing when he has some line around him that he kind of looks like he's back to some extent. But it's also obvious with the play calling on Sunday night that Belichick doesn't trust him a lot at this point in time. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves throughout the course of the season. I think you got Tampa Bay that it's pretty obvious that this offense is going to start clicking at some point, and that's going to be a insane 6 to 8 week offensive run whenever that starts to happen. So that'll be interesting to watch. But at this point in time, I think the number one thing that's really stood out at me through 2 weeks is how old Drew Brees looks. I don't know if that man can throw a ball 10 yards in the air right now. He looks insanely old, and he looked bad in that game against Brady, but Brady threw 2 picks that kind of overshadowed that. But man, does Drew Brees look old.
Yeah, the Twitter talk on Sunday had a lot of Jameis Winston, calling for Jameis Winston, and if that Saints offense doesn't start clicking, they could be in some trouble. But yeah, despite what many people thought in week 1, Tom Brady isn't dead yet. Sean, your thoughts on the injuries and the early goings in the NFL?
Well, and Tampa got bit by the injury bug too. Chris Godwin went down. They're without their speedster on the outside. Fortunately for them, playing against Carolina, didn't very much matter because Mike Evans was able to beat him over the top, and he has very little top end speed. So, but he's real tall, like a tree. But not a lot of other targets. Not a lot of people benefited from it. I thought it was people talk about Tom Brady and how he's not dead and he's Tom's back and didn't really do a tremendous job of spreading the ball around. Now he's got a running game that's pretty good and a defense that's able to back him up like he had in New England. I think Tampa's a good all around team. But I'd like to see Tom get back to that spreading the ball around, getting some guys where you're like in week 1 that Scotty Miller had a good game, disappeared in this one, didn't even really get the tight ends that involved. It was pretty much the Mike Evans show. So I'd like to see him, try to get guy. Maybe not having Chris Godwin to stretch the field. They always like he likes having a speed guy, could help. But as far as the injury bug, like you said, preseason, people talk the whole time about how it's meaningless. People can get hurt ironically, that was one of the biggest arguments against getting rid of preseason games. It's a risk of injury. It's a chance for these guys to get hurt. And darn well in the preseason, the guys that benefit the most and the guys that get the most reps are not your starters. They're those middle tier guys that if that injury does happen, you have guys that all of a sudden got reps against other teams, saw different offenses, got yelled at by coaches, things that, you don't get in a practice. And in a practice, you can extend camp unless your body and your joints and your muscles are used to taking some abuse. And in preseason, at least you're getting some bruises. Your body's getting used to the idea of being stopped at a moment's notice. And kind of prepping itself for the long run. And like you're seeing, these guys, and a lot of those injuries didn't happen in the first quarter. Some did, but a lot of these are ones where as guys are playing 3-4 quarters at full speed, the joints and the bones, they don't have, they don't have that repetition building up to it. Just like anything physically, you have to kind of get that up. So I hope the league's looking at this going, you know what, maybe that preseason has some value. As far as other surprises, you can tell me the Eagles stink, and you're right. But whether or not you want to give Dallas praise for that win, I mean, they put some they put some effort forth, obviously. But I think the whole NFC East stinks. Washington only won week 1 because they played us. That's the only reason they won. And Dallas, I mean, for all intents and purposes, the only reason they won is because Atlanta holds on to a 20-point lead like I hold on to a diet. Like, it just doesn't work. They don't know how to hold on to that thing. So, watching a ball spin around for 10 minutes while you wait for it to go 10 yards, I can't. I'm not even going to get into that.
The problem with the Cowboys is the defense. The offense is. The offense is fine.
But I think when we talked about the NFC East, that's what I said. I said I don't think their defense is good enough to get them there. Fortunately for them, the rest of us stink.
I mean, I was going to say their defense will be good enough to get them there because just by default, because and that's why I think obviously the Falcons, the botch on that onside kick was just one of the most baffling things I've ever seen.
There's a couple big positive stories. I mean, as much as the Eagles looked bad, I thought the Rams looked fairly effective. I thought the offense looked creative, way more than the ever-present Doug Peterson offense and the school of Andy Reid. Didn't look very inventive, but McVay did. And, now you have a team. The surprise of the week was last night. I mean, you can say Drew Brees looks old. You can say he looks bad. But that defense doesn't look bad. And Derek Carr and that Raiders offense with some young talent and even an injured Henry Ruggs, who has not looked the same since he left week 1 with an injury, came back in. He's played, but hasn't done anything since he got hurt. But despite
Start the car, baby.
But despite that, they looked good. I think the Raiders looked real good. And made kind of a statement, to go out there, especially on a week where the Chiefs didn't look that great, and a Chargers team looked effective enough, especially with a Herbert at quarterback, which, by the way, Tyrod Taylor, no matter what the coach says, may have just found himself back to the bench in that scenario. So a lot of cool storylines, a lot of sad ones, but it was definitely one of the more exciting storyline weeks that I can remember in the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's look at 4 big matchups that I picked here in the NFL this weekend. We start on Sunday at 1:00. It is the 2-0 Rams at the 2-0 Bills, who are a 3-point home favorite.
Boy, does that sound weird?
Yeah. The
2-0 Rams and the 2-0 Bills.
Yeah, that one's a weird one. That one's definitely a weird one.
Good for them.
But the over/under 47.5. 1:00 on Fox. So I like, the Rams are really good. Like they showed the stat with McVay coming east, playing those early games. Sometimes affects these West Coast teams. They're, I think, undefeated in those games. So I like that to continue to roll. I think that Rams defense is going to get at the Bills offense. I like the Rams to win outright. I don't think either team is going to score a lot here, so I'm going to again roll the under on a Rams game. So I'll take Rams and the under. Dave.
We're going to go with the Bills, circle the wagons. Josh Allen's looked surprisingly good this year. I don't want to say he was awful last year, but you can see his progression this year in a positive route here so far. But he's looked pretty good. Still not sold on this Rams team, and I think Goff, if you can get pressure on him, which the Eagles weren't super effective at doing last week, if you can get pressure on it, and you look at his stats when pressured and hurried, he's a completely different quarterback, which I think the Bills with that strong D-line are going to be able to do. So I'm taking the Bills by a touchdown or more, and taking the under as well. I think the Rams are going to struggle to score in this one. I wouldn't be surprised if they get under 14 points total. I think the Bills D is really going to shut them down, and there's potential for weather up in Buffalo as well for this one. So that could further hamper the fun in this one.
Sean, how about you?
I appreciate you guys constantly setting me up to disagree with both of you. I appreciate that. because I'm going to disagree with Dave on the Rams. I think the Rams, you're right. You can get pressure on Goff and you can disrupt things, but the Rams are creatively running the ball for the first time in years. They're getting multiple guys involved, including wide receivers, and part of that's why the Eagles couldn't get off the field on third down, because they kept looking at Goff and saying, if we can get to him. And McVay has realized that if he can get the ball out of Goff's hands on a running play that's a gadget play, there's no time to make a mistake. So I think I like the Rams to score a good bit of points. I'm not going to take the weather into account in case it doesn't happen. I'm going to take it on paper, but I'm going to say I like the Bills. I do agree with Dave there. I like Josh Allen. I like the what Stephon Diggs seems to have done for his confidence. Josh Allen is not making the mistakes he has, but the Bills' defense, despite getting pressure, has looked vulnerable. I think the Bills, they gave up too many yards and points to Miami for me to like them to push the under, and I think the Rams could have been scored on a lot more than the Eagles did. I do see the comment there, defenses are so good. I don't think that they show it in this game because the offenses are good enough to push them. I'm going to take the over in the Bills.
I always like when people say that Dave is wrong. That's always one of my most.
Well, then you're going to love me.
We're gonna next move to Seattle. It's the 1-1 Cowboys with the 2-0 Seattle Seahawks, who are a 5.5-point home favorite. 56 is the over/under line on this one. 425 on Fox. I'm going to kick it to you, Dave, first, because if I don't go plug my computer in, we're going to go off the air. So I'm going to mute myself, and I'm going to go get that cable while you talk about this game.
Yeah, so this is I'm not high on the Seahawks this year. I was pretty big on the Pats last weekend against the Seahawks. Obviously, they left me down by the hook there. I had 4.5, and they somehow didn't make that 2-point conversion or kick the damn extra point to screw me on that one. But I feel like that this is a spot that it feels too easy to take the Seahawks with only laying 5 points in this one, 4.5-ish. But I think that Dallas is competitive in this somehow. Russell Wilson is just one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the NFL, no doubt about that. So he's always the game changer that every team wishes they have or had. I mean, realistically, your top 3 are Rodgers, Wilson, and Patty Mahomes, of course. But with Wilson on the field, you gotta imagine he's going to torch Dallas's defense. This one's got to go over in theory, so the under probably is what's the correct pick. But there's no way I'm going to be caught holding an under ticket on this game. But I think Dallas is going to go into Seattle and not pull a Tony Romo there at the end and come out with the victory. So Dallas straight up on this one. And you could tell me I'm wrong, Sean, because it'll piss Jim off. So we're good with that.
Yeah, Sean.
Dallas. You took Dallas and the over?
Yes, sir.
You're wrong. Here's why. First of all, the Seattle Seahawks, usually after a big win, and whether or not they covered, like you're right, they screwed me on that too. They let New England get just close enough. But I had Seattle last week. I still have Seattle this week. Russell Wilson, for all I'm considering, if I'm the Seahawks, I never want him to get an MVP vote because he doesn't say he has a chip on his shoulder, but you know he does. Because there's been a handful of years here. I could probably name 3 years in the last 10 where Russell Wilson should have been the MVP and hasn't even gotten a vote for it. However, you're wrong on both accounts because not only is Russell Wilson good enough to beat the Cowboys and the Seahawks are good enough, I think the Seahawks defense has shown me that they are better than people thought they were. I think that some of the additions in the offseason, especially Adams from the Jets, has proven to be extremely valuable, and they have all the pieces on defense that Dallas doesn't. So although I think points will be scored and Wilson will look good, I think they stop Dallas a handful more times than Dallas can stop them. But there's going to be a lot of change of possession in it, and I think it's going to stay under. So I'm going to take Seattle under.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Seattle's defense, yeah, they're decent, but New England just put up 30 on them in that building. You take away the 12th man, I think Dallas can score more than 30 points on this Seattle team. Obviously, I think the Patriots' offense looks better than a lot of people expected them to, and if Cam Newton stays healthy, people who hate that the Patriots are good are going to hate this year as well.
Panthers fans.
But like Dave.
You're welcome, Dave.
But I just it's the Cowboys defense that really concerns me in this game. What's the over under 56? I'm gonna like the over in this one. I mean, 65 points were scored in New England and Seattle, so I think you're going to see more than that here. I'm going to take Dallas to cover, but I think Seattle still wins the game. I think this is going to be a fun one to watch. Jason says Seahawks have a magician at QB. They'd be awful without him. Dallas struggles so much with pressure. He won't torch Dallas. The Hawks will win.
Sounds like he agrees with Jim.
Yeah, he also thinks Zeke has a big game. I like that Mike McCarthy uses the run game a lot more. I mean, they're actually running the ball inside the 10-yard line, which has not been seen in Dallas in about a decade.
I'm not sure Zeke has a big game. I think if you're talking fantasy points, maybe he gets some touchdowns. But I wouldn't plan on a ton of yards unless they start hitting him out of the backfield on passes. I think the Seahawks are going to key on that, and they're going to try to make Dak win this game.
Oh yeah, I mean that,
but they did that against New England, and they almost lost the game. So, go figure.
Yeah, and I mean, Dak is already looking comfortable in that new offense, and I think the more the season goes on, I think he can look even more comfortable.
I'd also like to point out the irony of last week's Seahawks game, because they kept showing that 1-yard play in the Super Bowl, obviously, and where everybody thinks the Seahawks should have run, and they get flack because they passed. And all that I've seen is that New England should have thrown and not run.
Right.
So, screw fans, screw the media, make the call. You're the coach for a reason.
I also
you're
think
going to be wrong either way if you miss.
I also think part of the problem with the decision to run is because Cam doesn't go under center. So you're instead of starting that play from the 1-yard line, you're starting it from the 3.5.
Yeah, but they even talked about it. All the announcers talked about it right before that play. Like, you got to go to that play, right? Like, they haven't stopped it all day. And they're right. I would have done the exact same thing. I would have had, maybe a plan B, where you can read what's happening. But I thought the defense did a real great job on that of not selling what they were doing. And Cam just assumed that hole was going to be there, and somebody made a hell of a way to stop.
I mean, it had been there the whole game.
Because one block happens that didn't happen on that, Cam's right back in. So he's a big, heavy guy. I'd put it in his hands. I don't trust anyone else to run that ball.
All right, let's go to Sunday night. It is the 2-0 Packers at the 1-1 as of last night. New Orleans Saints, who are 3.5-point home favorite. 51.5 is the number on this one. Of course, 8:20 on NBC. I think the Packers have kind of been one of those surprise teams coming out the gate. I talked about on our NFL preview that I thought, potentially mid-season trade deadline.
Sorry.
Bullpen got him again.
I mean, at one point they were up 5-0, and they lost 8-7. I think Hector Neris got the loss. Big surprise.
Unbelievable, man. Unbelievable.
They're going to lose right out of the playoff picture here.
How do you have a bullpen that bad with that much talent? I mean, it's one thing if my Orioles have that bad of a bullpen, but
anyway, back to the football.
I mean, we were talking that, the Packers may look at potentially dealing Aaron Rodgers midseason. All of a sudden, Aaron's like, I'm still here, guys. I said that. And I stand by the thought. I mean, that Rodgers didn't look like himself last year, and he certainly does to start this year. And the Saints don't look like themselves. And I think the turnaround on a short week after what happened in Las Vegas, I like the Packers to win outright here. I like the over. I think the Packers are going to continue to score a lot of points. Dave.
I'm really torn on this game. I grabbed some of the Packers at 3.5 just because I think it moves down to 3, which it's already done, I believe. But I really, the more and more I look at this, I don't know how the Saints defense is going to stop Rodgers. They've shown some obvious weakness with Carr even torching them a bit over the top with D-backs and everything. But logic tells you that it's too easy to go against New Orleans because they look like shit on Monday night, and the Packers have looked really good for 2 games. And I say it every podcast during football season, but you're not as bad as the last game. You're not as good as the last game. So I feel like somehow since New Orleans got smacked on Monday Night Football in front of the whole country and a national audience, et cetera, that they somehow find a way to win this game. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, which means it normally is going to happen in the NFL somehow. But I'm taking New Orleans, and I'm taking the over.
All right, Sean, how about you?
Well, yeah, I think you know, whether it's rust on Drew Brees, whatever you want to call it. Last week and last night, I guess. You know, you're also in a scenario where for the first time in a long time he hasn't had Michael Thomas on the side on one side of the field. So you're looking at a guy that, you know, is getting a third of your targets almost a game. It's pretty brutal. Having said that, I think the first thing I'm going to point out is that the Saints defense has not disappointed. I think they still look real good. Someone agrees with Dave. That's disappointing. But Green Bay's defense has looked pretty good too. They've had some games where they gave up.
Shut it down. I got fans.
Yeah. First of all, I'm never shutting anything down. Second of all, you can have your fans because nobody else wants them. Anyway, nothing against you, Jason. It's just in this scenario, you're on the wrong side of the ball. The Packers have looked good on both sides of the ball. And you had a tale of two games. You had week one where they leaned on Aaron Rodgers. You know, it's a tale of two Aarons. You had Aaron Rodgers, you know, just putting up stellar numbers in week one on my fantasy bench, I'd like to point out. But and then in week two, you had the oh, good. He's a nice guy, Jason is. Tell me no worries here. You keep on listening. We like having you around. And in week two, it was the Aaron Jones show. So, you know, you have a what appears to be an improved offensive line with pass protection, with a quarterback that doesn't even necessarily need pass protection because he makes magic happen either way. And then you have Aaron Jones who's going to definitely benefit from that. So with both sides of the ball there, and with defenses being what I would consider to be almost equal, I'm going to put Green Bay over the top on this one. So, Dave, guess what? You're wrong. And because of the defense being pretty good, I think that over-under is just a little high for me. I think it's going to get close. And with a couple good offensive or bad defensive possessions, I could see it pushing over. But I'm gonna go with the under. I think the defenses are just good enough to hold that off. But I'm going to take Green Bay, especially with the 3 points on their side.
All right.
Looks like it was Workman that gave up the home run there, sir. So
yeah, well, it ended in 8. So I will defend the Phillies. They fought back, tied the game, took a 1-run lead in the 8th, gave it back up in the bottom of the 8th, and then they said, "Don't bother playing the 9th. You guys are terrible." So just go.
You guys can have it. We'll leave. All right, and the final. Obviously, this is probably the most marquee matchup of the weekend, and maybe one of the bigger ones of the entire year. Sean, you knocked your towel behind you. The Notre Dame.
No, it was bound to fall off. Everybody caught COVID in South Bend, so the Irish towel's gone.
It is gone. 2-0 Chiefs travel to Baltimore. The 2-0 Ravens, 4-point home favorite for Baltimore there. 53.5 is your over/under on that one. Monday Night Football, 8:15 ESPN. Man, you know, and you know, not to steal Dave's phrase, but you know, you're not as bad as you look, not as good as you looked last week. So I think Kansas City is going to want to bounce back here. You know, you're getting a potential AFC Championship preview here if the Ravens can figure out how to win in the postseason. But I like Lamar at home at 4 points. I think it's going to be close to a Chiefs cover. I think this one's going to be a tight game. I like the points here. I like 53.5. I like the over. I think obviously the offenses are huge parts of these teams, and I don't think that you know, I don't think Kansas City is going to come out flat like they were a week ago. So I'll take the Chiefs to cover the 4. Baltimore winning the game and the over. Dave.
So I'm going with the under on this one. I think I think the one weakness that Kansas City really has is stopping the run, and I think Baltimore's able to exploit that a little bit. However, I don't think we know a whole lot about this Baltimore team at this point in time. They've had 2 pretty soft games leading up to this, which has kind of been a little bit beneficial that they can they can get some quote unquote practice time in here during real live games. Obviously not practice time, but some simulation, for lack of better terms. I really like this Ravens team. They have the best running back at quarterback in the league. So I don't think Lamar is a good quarterback by any sense of the means, but I think he's a really good running back at the quarterback position. So I think that Baltimore is going to have enough here being at home and everything to get through this week. But again, you're going against a way better quarterback in Patty Mahomes here that could turn the tables. So I'm taking Baltimore by a touchdown or so. It's a little early here in the week. I got some more digging to do on this one, but liking Baltimore in the under. And I think if Baltimore wins, the under gets there because I think they're going to run the ball. So we'll see how that works. But this should be a hell of one to watch Monday night.
Yeah, from a fantasy standpoint, I'd be fine with them running the ball. Sean, how about you?
I think this is two teams that are still, even though they're clearly dominant in the NFL.
And we're back. Dave's wrong again.
Wrong again. He's back on my side of the ball. I think that if you're a Chiefs fan, I think that you avoided a very dangerous point. Obviously coming into a game against the Ravens, who I have in the Super Bowl, and a lot of people do. Coming in when you have kind of a sputtering week is a very dangerous scenario. The good news for the Chiefs is they managed to pull that game out thanks to Pat Mahomes. And I always feel like Pat Mahomes, at least from what I've seen, seems to play up or down to his competition. And having watched Andy Reid for a decade, I know he does too. So I don't think Andy Reid's afraid of this matchup. And I think just coming out with a win is going to be enough of a boost to kind of push them forward. But this is two teams that I think, despite one having won a Super Bowl last year and the other one basically having won the regular season, I think they're still both struggling to find themselves. I think both teams, as far as their, they obviously both have their marquee players, and I think they have some good pieces on defense. The Ravens probably having more of those, are still struggling to decide, what kind of defense are we? What kind of offense are we really? Are we going to run the ball more? Are we going to let the guys throw? But I think Dave's wrong on the under. I think I'm going to take the over on this. I think Pat Mahomes is going to come out firing. And you're right. The Ravens do run the ball really well, but they run the ball like most teams throw the ball. Their running play is huge gashes. It's massive plays. And when Lamar Jackson decides to run, he does it for pretty much however far the field is, and just keeps on going. I think they run the ball. They run it well, and you're right on that count. But I think they run it fast and they run it in big chunks, and it works like a passing game. And I think Lamar Jackson's gonna use that to his advantage. And Marquise Brown, I think, is one of my fantasy. I don't want to say locks of the week, but definitely should be in a starting lineup, because I think there's a good chance that as this game starts to become the shootout that I think it's going to be, Lamar Jackson's going to be hitting him over the top quite a bit. So I'm going to take the over in that one. Having said that, I think Andy Reid uses the momentum from the win last week, takes a Ravens team that has won a couple games against some lesser teams, and is maybe a bit overconfident on top of their mountain. I'm going to take Andy Reid and the Chiefs and the over, only because Dave's wrong.
All right, and then real quick here before we get out, a quick check-in on both the NBA playoffs and the Stanley Cup Final. The Eastern Conference in the NBA, the Miami Heat are up 2-1 on the Boston Celtics. The game 4 of that is tomorrow night. Heat, I think, surprising some people coming out early in those 2 games, and Celtics now having to battle back. The Lakers in the Western Conference up 2-0 on the Denver Nuggets. Currently trailing, though, in the second quarter, 36-29. That game on TNT. So if you want something to watch when we go off the air, that's always an option. But like I said, the Lakers trailing. Nuggets, I think, really need this game if they want to get back and try to win this series. I still think ultimately the Lakers win the West. I don't think we're going to see Denver take this series. But I will say that the winner of game number 4 in the East will go on to win that series. If Boston can even the series, I think the Heat are in trouble. But I don't think if the Heat can get that third win, that they'll end up losing 3 in a row. So, Dave, thoughts on the NBA?
Yeah, I agree with that. The Heat have looked really good for the little bit of basketball that I've seen. They've been kind of surprising. I think you could get them during the COVID stoppage at 80-1 or something like that. So, really impressive run for them. And Boston's no slouch either with Jason Tatum and all that. So, interesting to see how Game 4 is pretty critical, of course, as well. Lakers, I thought the one thing that was really interesting is when they did the inbound on that last second play in Game 2, LeBron pretty much did nothing. So he kind of stood there and made Anthony Davis take the final shot. So continued to give some LeBron haters some more fire to their fuel to their fire there. I have no opinion on it really. It's basketball, so I could care less. But it's interesting to see that the Nuggets have battled back from 2-3-1 deficits. I think, and I just can't see you going down 3-1 to the Lakers and have any type of chance. They're just too good and too much talent on there. But who knows? You got to believe that the Lakers. You got to believe the Lakers pull through here. Again, the NBA wants ratings. All the sports wants ratings, so that's gonna play into things too. Everything's rigged, but that's how it works.
Yeah, that's what we said last week. That the NBA wants the Lakers in, and you have good matchups and storylines, no matter who gets out of the East. Sean, quick thoughts on the NBA.
Well, I'd like to point out that Dave's wrong. This time it's grammatically. It sounds like you couldn't care less, but you wanted to point out you could care less. It didn't sound like it. So just wanted to point out, I forgot the N apostrophe T at the end of your thing there. So, but you're right.
Leave my thing out of this, please.
But you're right in some scenarios. The one thing you're right in is that the Lakers aren't going to lose this series, and it has nothing. I mean,
Holly says hi.
Holly, hey guys, hey Holly, how you doing? I'm just beating him up for a little while. He'll be back to you in a couple of but LeBron's not going to, and it's not so much a ratings thing in the West. It's the fact that they're just better, and the Denver Nuggets maybe have enough talent to push the Lakers game for game, but I think they wore themselves out. Against the Clippers, who I thought were going to get through to play an LA Western Final. Didn't get that. The Nuggets played a heck of a series, and they just kind of wore themselves out. And not only do I think the Lakers come back in this game, I think it's a sweep and they have time to rest while the East figures it out. I'm going to take the Heat either way, whether they win Game 4 or not. I think the way they've been playing, you obviously want to win Game 4. You don't want this momentum to end. And then you kind of probably have to win Game 5. But I trust them to win one of those two games and then go on to win the series for a Lakers-Heat final.
All right, and then we move to the Stanley Cup Finals. Tampa Bay getting the win last night to even the Stanley Cup Final at 1 game.
Really, I hadn't heard.
Really, that's amazing that you're down there and you hadn't heard about it. I think that was a very important win for the Tampa Bay Lightning to not go down 2 games to none. Again, the Stars team, really to me comes down to their goaltending and as I'm not trying to take away from the talent they have on that roster and the way they've been playing in this postseason, but by all accounts, we've been saying for a couple series now, Dallas isn't going to get out of this round. Dallas isn't going to get out of this round, and they keep going because their goaltender, just Khudobin, continues to just play out of this world in that net. If he can't hold up, or if Tampa can figure out a way to beat him on a regular basis, Tampa Bay's in big time trouble. Big time trouble. Dave, we'll go to you.
Yes, I think I kind of agree there, but I think the series is going to play out a lot more like Game 2 than it did Game 1. The only thing that I think that the NHL really got wrong with these playoffs is I don't think there's enough time in between the series, and I'd just like to see that extended like another game or another day, not another game. But we've seen it pretty consistently here that when the series is over, the team that has the longer lag in between has almost won Game 1 at an 80 to 85% clip, which is pretty critical given the fresh legs and everything. So I'm not surprised to see Dallas win Game 1, but then you get the pushback from Tampa in Game 2. So it's realistically a best of best of five, as we all know here. But I think that Dallas is, I don't know what tenacity is probably a good word for it. Has frustrated the offensive prowess of Tampa Bay there in Game 1, but Tampa had a pretty good pushback in Game 2, and it's. I think that Tampa's got to keep their D-men active, and activate them and push in there a little bit. That seemed to work fairly well there in the second game. So see what happens there. But you got a long series left, and I think it's going to be a long series that these teams are going to go back and forth on it a little bit. But I'm going with Dallas here in this one long term to lift the cup.
Yeah, I want Dallas. I don't want any Eastern Conference team to win. Jason here says his heart says Dallas, but he thinks it's going to be Tampa. They have freakish skill.
That's a damn Dave answer.
Well, I got to say, as far as Jason's concerned, maybe he's been listening to the same radio feeds I'm getting down here. But I think I predicted Tampa to win this, and I kind of went on a whole F Dallas rant on the last week. But the more I think about it, I don't want the cup across the bay from my house. And watching the two teams play and really kind of focusing on Dallas to closing out the West Series and going into this, like you said, I think the goaltending's too good there. I think Tampa Bay's, kind of what Dave was saying. He was right. And yes, he was right that the defense needs to be you got to amp up the defense in Tampa Bay if you're going to win this series. I don't think they do it. I like Dallas to win the series as well. So, Dave, you were right there as well. And you were also right. The NHL should have put extra time between series. I don't know if I'm on your side as far as what it did for Game 1. I would say that if you looked at all the series any year, that team, there it is. Dave was right this time. But I think
shut it down.
I don't
boys.
think
Shut
that's
it down.
necessarily affected those Game 1s. I think if you looked historically at all the Game 1s going into that, whether or not that lag team had it, I don't know that that's why. But you're right; it couldn't have hurt to kind of level the playing field a little. But at least we're all kind of on the same playing field here for the first time all night. Dallas.
So I feel like all the money you have on Tampa Bay because all three of us agree.
All three of us agreed on Dallas, so Tampa should win in 5.
Jim, serious question for Jim here, though.
I feel like that's a banner I got to keep just on the ready so that if we actually
Dave's right.
Davis right.
I like it. Jim, serious question though. How is it going to feel to watch Dallas lift the Stanley Cup again prior to the Cowboys lifting the Super Bowl trophy? Just want to know.
I mean, being a Cowboys fan,
and put your banner up again.
Being a Cowboys fan, you learn to live your life as a loser. So it just is what it is. I mean,
and again, we're all on the same page.
Yeah, and Dave was right.
Dave was right.
But I got nothing else. If you guys don't have anything to add here, Dave, where can people follow you? I know you like to post some betting things on your Twitter page, so make sure people can get over there on that.
Yeah, we're at Huddle Up Dave on Twitter, and the only other thing I want to just throw out is, man, did Bryson overpower the U.S. Open course this weekend up at Wingfoot? Just absolutely stupid and completely changing golf. So it'll be interesting to see what the USGA does to, I don't want to say reprimand, but what are they going to do to fix that type of thing?
How do you combat that? I mean, they literally, yeah, we haven't won in 20 years, and he's taking low blows. I mean, Carolina's a team that couldn't figure out how to make Cam Newton work, but yeah, I don't. I mean, you're dropping Arnold Palmer pounders, getting lost in the rough, and Bryson looks at that and goes, "I can hit a ball out of that." I don't know what else you can really do there to combat him, but. Because it's not that he's not even a skilled golfer otherwise. I mean, he powers the ball, but obviously, that's only one part of the game. If you're not going to be able to putt on those greens, if you're not going to be able to short game out of those roughs, that's I don't know how the USGA combats that, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see moving forward. Also, I thought if you didn't see any today, Tiger Woods had the charity tournament. From his public course out there in the Ozarks. It was a pretty cool looking course. So if you check some of the replays on that, Sean, let people know where they can follow you and anything if you have anything to add.
All right. Well, I'd be a fool if I didn't just go out there and make my Eagles prediction and say that the Eagles are going to win this week because they have to, and no one thinks they can, and it's the Bengals. So that's going to be my not so bold pick of the week is going to be the Eagles over the Bengals, especially with the Niners, Steelers, and Ravens all coming in consecutive weeks after that. Got to win this one. Having said that, you can follow me at Seanshine State, at Seanshine State. We're down here in the Seanshine State. And I do see quickly top beers. I don't know if I have a top one. Currently, we were talking before the show. I'm currently drinking Green Bench, which is right here out of St. Petersburg. And as an IPA guy, if you find an IPA from Green Bench, spot on. So if you're an IPA drinker and you're in the Tampa area, come over and see Green Bench here in St. Pete.
Sean, you're wrong. The top beer is a cold one.
Once again, you're wrong. The top beer is a free one.
How about a cold free one? Top
I
that.
was going to say, I'm not taking a free one if it's warm. But
now Jim is wrong.
Now that I can get
Motto of the show.
Jason says he's rocking the Lancaster Brewery Oktoberfest. Obviously, if you're Oktoberfest/pumpkin season, it is getting to be your time of year. I've been enjoying the Broken Skull IPA from El Segundo. If you can find that where you are, I've been enjoying that one here lately. So you can follow me at Big Jim Sports. Obviously, you want to follow the show. We are at Huddle Up Podcast on Facebook, Twitter. But again, go to any of our social media and just click the link tree. Everything you need, all the podcast links, everything's right there. Should be back in the normal studio next week. A little bit of construction going on this week. So that's why it looks a little bit different and sounds a little bit different. But we'll be back as normal next week. Jason, thanks for tuning in. For everybody else who tuned in, we do appreciate that. Until next time, stay safe, stay smart, and go for the win.